Lead-ins and context. We hope you enjoy. The technical definition of a lead-in is shown on the screen, but basically, it just tells the reader what's going on when the quote has been said and helps the reader understand the use of this quote. It also acts as a transition. The 3 basic steps to include a lead-in and context correctly is to first use a transition word, then use context based on your knowledge of the text, and finally, properly cite the source using quotation marks and a parenthetical citation. An easy example of a lead-in and context is shown on the screen. As you can see, it is correct because it has a transition word, it provides context, and it properly cites the source. This example is from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Analyze it and focus on the lead-in. We will be telling you what's wrong on the next slide. The 2 main reasons why that quote was cited incorrectly is because first, the context did not apply correctly to the quote, and second, the quote was standing by itself and the lead-in was in a separate sentence, which makes it not a lead-in. This is the corrected example of the lead-in context of that quote. Analyze it and see what's different. We will be going over it on the next slide. The main reasons why this version is correct is because the context is correct information and is directly associated with the quote. Also, the lead-in is in the same sentence, which allows them to flow together well. This is an example of an incorrect usage of lead-ins and context, and it is from Of Mice and Men. Analyze the lead-in and we'll be going over what's wrong on the next slide. The reasons why this example was incorrect is because the transition from the lead-in to the quote is very abrupt and unclear. Also, the context is practically useless since it just confuses the reader rather than helping the understanding. This example utilizes the same quote from Of Mice and Men, but it is a corrected example due to the lead-in. Analyze the differences and we'll be going over why it is correct on the next slide. This example is correct because it is very fluid since the lead-in and quote has a smooth transition. Also, the context portion is very useful since it helps set up the rest of the body paragraph as well as helps the understanding of the quote. Take a look at this wonderful example of the use of a lead-in from The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. This example is incorrect because it has a very basic and simple lead-in which gives no context. The absence of context is very ineffective since it does not help the understanding and it makes the quote basically standing alone. This is the corrected version of the quote from The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. Analyze the differences and we'll be going over why it is correct on the next slide. This was a very good example because not only does the lead-in flow well with the quote, it also explains the conditions of when it was stated, which helps the reader understand the true meaning of the quote and thus helps the meaning of the essay. Evidence is a very important part of your essay, and lead-ins and context help you optimize this portion through helping the reader understand the quote even more as well as acting as a segue. Make sure to use lead-ins and context on your next essay. Thank you for watching.
Created using Powtoon.